The thing that I look for early is someone with a really engaged and sticky community. Chat interaction, almost regardless of the chat size, meaningfully engaging with that live audience. Some people are doing that at 40 to 100 viewers. There are a ton of people at a high level in gaming who do meditate. Like, they think of it as part of what gives them an edge. So like a lot of people don't talk about it. Like, it's something they do that gives them an advantage. Like, I wouldn't tell my opponent either, right?
Welcome to the Becoming a Streamer podcast by Pipeline, where we interview your favorite streamers typically, but this time we're actually going to bring someone behind the scenes and take a look at how the agency world works. Our guest today is Taylor, who's the head of talent at Queen's Gaming Collective, which is a new organization that is supporting and elevating female content creators. In this episode, you'll learn a lot about managers, agents, working with brands, should you get an affiliate relationship, and some of the trends and patterns that Taylor has seen over the last 5 years in working with hundreds of content creators. If you'd like to hear more behind the scenes, then please let us know in the comments and we'll do more of these in the future. Without further ado, let's jump into the episode. Taylor, a huge thank you for joining us and coming to share your story today. We typically have creators on the show, so they're full-time creators and making a bunch of content, but your story is a little bit different, and I'm so excited to get into that. The majority of our audience are new streamers, and I think your experience working with content creators over the last few years is going to be really valuable to them. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, Steven. I'm super excited to be here today.
So I know that you recently accepted a new role, and I think you'd be able to, I don't want to try and describe it. Could you describe what are you doing today? What is your role within the content creator ecosystem?
Yeah, so I'm the head of talent at the Queen's Gaming Collective. So if you don't know what a head of talent does or what a head of talent is, I sort of think about it in terms of an auto battler. So my job is a lot like playing an auto battler. It's my job to identify, the pieces I want to have on my team, the champions, the units, what have you, and then I decide how to itemize them and how to place them. And then, just like in an auto battler, I sort of send them out into the field. But with Queens, it's a roster of talent, and we're like a management company and a gaming collective.
What a fascinating analogy, comparing it to an auto battler.
I play a lot of auto battlers, so I think that's where I came up with it.
What's your favorite auto battler?
Teamfight Tactics, 100%. I really also love Hearthstone Battlegrounds, though. Those are probably my two faves.
Are you playing ranked?
Yes.
What are you at?
So the Battlegrounds ladder just reset, and I haven't had a chance to play since the patch. I'm pretty average at Battlegrounds. It tends to be something that I think about more in the background, or I'm kind of doing a dual monitor situation with it. With Teamfight Tactics, I am currently plat, and last set I was diamond. I've just been working a lot. Getting to diamond the first time was no joke, and so I haven't had the time to put back into it.
Yeah, we have a common friend, Bryce, who I've known for many years, and he is very much on that TFT grind. He claims he still works, but I don't think he does.
I think he works a lot, and I think he plays even more. His ability to balance those things is really incredible, because he's really, really good at TFT, and I think a lot of it comes from, I'm sure we'll get more into this idea, but he's very strategic about how he spends his time and where he puts his energy, and I think that allows him to run ESG and be in charge over there, and then also maintain a pretty incredible level of TFT.
Okay, I realize you won't let me make fun of Bryce.
I will not.
So we will recognize he's a very disciplined individual. I agree with that. So one thing that a lot of our listeners they create content. Have you ever had the opportunity to create content?
I've done amateur content creation, not at the level that probably most of your listeners would aspire to, or anything at a large scale. I've always been on bigger scale projects, always somebody who's behind the scenes.
Well, I want to come back to winding the clock a little bit, because we've got an idea where you are. You're at Queen's Gaming Collective, which, if those listening don't know what it is, it's a super cool initiative. You should go check it out.
Queens.gg.
Queens.gg. There's the plug. Do go check it out after this podcast. Phenomenal group of people behind it as well. So do check it out. Okay, winding the clock back a bit, Taylor.
Yes.
How did you get into all of this? how did you get into, being on the agency side? Like, what led you from a career perspective? Like, did you go to school? There's no school for agencies. So like, how did you get into this?
Yeah. So I was I always was into video games ever since I was little. And especially as a young kid, I was mostly interested in like single player games. I played a lot of Pokemon, a lot of Super Mario Brothers. I think it was Deluxe on the Game Boy Color. And I was nervous about competitive games. It was something that was sort of told to me pretty explicitly, like wasn't really for girls. And so I was always interested. I was always like spectating, literally standing behind my friends sometimes or sitting behind everyone who's holding a controller. So I was always interested. And when I was in college, my big group of friends got into League of Legends, and I had never seen anything like it. I'd mostly been into like console or handheld up to that point. Didn't know much about PC gaming, and I just fell in love so hard. Like I had, League is so complicated and so interesting, and there's so many different things to learn when you approach it. And I'm somebody who's like really passionate about and invigorated by learning new things. And so when I encountered League as someone who really didn't know anything about PC gaming, like when people say the new player experience is rough in a game like League was the first PC game like I ever got into. And so like the learning curve was rough for me.
I hated it. When I first started playing, I actually quit right away and then came back 3 months later. It was too hard.
I played like maybe 2 or 3 games, and then I took like almost probably a year of like learning and studying and watching before I felt comfortable like trying again, because I think so many people came to League through Dota or came to League through like some other core hardcore game, and for me, the learning curve was almost insurmountable. I'm still trash at League to this day. Like I understand very well, but like I can't, my hands can't do it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that's happened to us all. I think we're just getting older, Taylor, these days. We can't keep up with them kids. On the school, so what were you at school studying? And you said you got into League. What year is this? Like, how far back are we right now?
Oh gosh, we're probably in like 2012, 2013, pretty early for League. And I was going to school for psychology. I also did a ton of like outside of my degree work in math, in biology, and in ethnic studies. I think I kind of went into college like not very well rounded as a student, and then I got a liberal arts degree, and I felt like I remained like not very well rounded. And so I took a lot of math science, and computer science to kind of round myself out. And so I came out of college, I think honestly, like still pretty unfocused in terms of, that's a wide array of subjects and none of them are, to your point, directly applicable to, working in an agency.
So coming out of college, where did you go?
So when I was in college, I worked as a tutor. So I taught, math, science. I did a lot of test prep, English. I was a big subject variety tutor. And coming out of college, I went into management and I started managing tutors. And the tutoring company that I worked for, I like moved out to LA with them. Coincidence would have it that I actually... So when I got obsessed with League, I was living in Colorado. I had never really spent time in LA. And the tutoring company that I've been working for years moved me into a management role and moved me to Los Angeles. And about 2 weeks after I moved to LA, our office moved to be less than half a mile away from Riot HQ. And so I went from being like this very young person, like daydreaming in my bedroom about like, how do you stack the Nasus queue? Like, how does laning work? To, working in this office tower where we could literally see Riot games. And it lit this fire in me where I was like, I have to find a way to like get into this industry. Like, this is something that I'm so interested in and I'm so passionate about. And, and I could literally see it from my desk. And so it was something that I just, I started trying to kind of figure out like what characterizes the people who have made it in the space, and how can I find a way to bring my skill set, into this world? Like, what can I do here? Because like, as I already mentioned, like I'm probably not going to go pro in League.
I think one thing you just said there, which seems to be a through line, you were teaching other tutors. You were like managing other tutors to be better tutors.
Yes.
And it just seems interesting. Like even back in college, there was this thread to like what you're doing now, on the talent side, is helping. And I think a lot of our listeners too, when they're thinking about getting involved in the space, there's a lot of passion in the gaming space and the content creation space, and a lot of people want to get into it. They just don't know how. And I think what some don't realize, which I think you have realized, is that there's more to do than just being the talent. There's other roles and things that have to be played within the ecosystem. And I think you've found one that really touches on what you're good at, which is talent management.
Yeah. So I, jumping ahead a bit just to keep the conversation rolling, I was working, well, actually, it's maybe good to say this. So when I left the tutoring job, I actually coached chess for a while in the LA area because I had been interviewing at a few gaming jobs or positions in gaming, and it just wasn't going very well. I had a lot of really painful rejections, a lot of really uncomfortable conversations that like, frankly, like as a woman, like had some pretty bad experiences right out the gate. And one of the things that I realized was in my control was I had nothing on my resume that would tell you that I was interested in or passionate about gaming, and I didn't have good relevant background, and I wanted to add that. And so when I left tutoring and managing tutors, I became a chess coach, which was one of the coolest summers, a really fun time in LA.
That is really cool, especially because I finished the Queen's Gambit recently, and just have a lot more empathy than maybe I did in the past around the role of a coach in chess. How long are you doing that for?
It was a short gig. I was there for less than a year. It was a really fun job, but it was really hard. We divided our time between really privileged communities and sort of using the activities we engaged in those communities to fund the bulk of the operation, which was teaching chess in like underserved and at-risk communities. And so it was, it was an amazing job. But it was just really hard.
Yeah, it seems there's so many through lines dating back, almost a decade ago, where you're focused on working with talent.
Focused on, finding folks who are really talented and helping them, figure out the direction they want to go, how to unlock that potential. What are the ways that we can like, even if you have like these huge dreams, like how can you advance the ball just a little, or how can you address what you're weak at? Or, a lot of times, especially with kids in chess, it's more about getting better at what you're good at, right? So sometimes when we're learning new things, we kind of take stock of our abilities and adjust what we're bad at. And a lot of times, at least we found in chess, that sometimes you made faster progress by like doubling or quadrupling down on what you're good at and like worrying less about what you're not good at, which I think is something that definitely applies sometimes in content creation and on social media.
Yeah. So moving from chess, you were there for a year, and then where'd you go after that?
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to join the team at Headspace, which is an app that teaches anybody who wants to learn how to meditate. They have a ton of amazing content in the app now around sleep, movement, exercise. But when I discovered the product, when I started using it, and when I worked there for the most part, it was an agnostic meditation teaching tool. And it was actually, I had started using the app while I was a tutor. I had been meditating since I was about 10, I think, was when my dad taught me how to do it the first time. And so Headspace was something that I got into while I was at the tutoring company. And then that was the opportunity that led me to leave being a chess coach, was the opportunity to join the team at Headspace.
And what were you doing at Headspace?
so many things. I was there in the earlier days, and so it was a startup kind of environment. I'm in an all hands on deck a lot of the time. Everybody wearing many different hats. You probably a thing or two about that pipeline, I imagine.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of things there. Some things that I really enjoyed were, I worked on, some gifting campaigns that we did with like these really incredible chocolate businesses where you could like buy a Headspace subscription for someone as a gift, and we would send out a chocolate, or working on the initial stages of the Headspace Sesame Street partnership. They've gone on to do really incredible things, and I was there sort of at the genesis of some of those things. And I also had the opportunity to build out a gaming and esports initiative while I was there. And you might be thinking to yourself, I've never heard about that. I don't know about that. And that is because the Kotaku piece about Riot Games came out close to the finish line on that project. And that was kind of the end of that for them. And, you said something earlier about through lines, and I think it's sort of interesting that there are these through lines of, me being like near or around these moments of setback around the conversation of like women in gaming or being a woman, and me sort of like getting thrown off the horse and being like, what can I do next? Like how can I? And so I left Headspace in the aftermath of that project ending, and had the opportunity to join Evolved Talent Agency run by Ryan Morrison.
And Evolved is they're not the biggest. There's definitely bigger agencies like CAA and WME, but they're one of the bigger agencies in esports representation. Is that right?
Yeah, Evolved has done a ton of like foundational and important work advancing player rights across so many games. And again, I think they've broadened their focus a lot in the time that I was there and in the time since I left. But they got their start really focusing on, advocating for player rights in situations and, where there wasn't someone doing that yet. They were really some of the first to market on that stuff.
Yeah. And then if this point is when you're, from a talent agent perspective, it kind of, I guess, officially started at this point?
Yeah. So Ryan brought me on to be a talent manager, and I quickly moved into the role of head talent manager. And then from there into being like an agent. And all three of those roles have like a lot of things in common, I think, especially to someone who is like newer to the industry. All of those roles are talent facing. And, there's always an element of the auto battler situation that I was mentioning before, where you're sort of trying to help your people get the right tools, get the right opportunities, position themselves the right way, think and move strategically. But it also has that auto battler component to it of like, when the round starts, when they hit go live, when the activation begins, like you can't do it for them. And so my job is really about like empowering people and like helping them be ready when the moment comes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm still getting a little bit of goosebumps just because I'm thinking about your journey from when you were teaching the TAs and your tutors, and you were all the way to the chess, and then to the Headspace. You started to going into like campaign management, partnerships, and it's just like how much you're empowering and working with people has just been a through line throughout your career. And I know you mentioned there's setbacks at different points. You've had setbacks, but there's like a persistence that you've had in this area. It's almost like a straight line. In these areas.
I think that I want to think that this is something that, what captivated me initially about esports and the League of Legends scene in particular was there were just so many people who just like refused to give up or to be swayed. And I think that really like inspired me. And to me, that was like, just as like a spectator, like, everyone in gaming in particular, and maybe this is true all over, I know much less, but you think about like the people in gaming who've like really made it, and every single one of those people is like they've put in so much work. They have refused to be denied. They have fought on and carried on. And, you know, I think about how to people outside gaming, so many of these folks look like an overnight success. And it's like, who's the soccer player that's like, I'm an overnight success, like 16 years in the making? I can't remember. I don't know who the quote is.
I don't know, but there's many soccer players. There's like Lionel Messi.
Sure. And the point stands, right? Like, so many people look like an overnight success because we only become aware of them in the moment when they like reach into our circle. But like, there's no such thing, I don't think.
There's not. There absolutely isn't. When you were working at Evolve, you start working with talent. How many streamers or creators would you say you've worked with now?
Oh gosh, it's hard to say. A lot. I would hate to like guess and be wrong, but it's a lot. You know, Evolved has done a ton of work in the esports space, and Ryan was somebody who is like a really powerful mentor to me and gave me the ability and the trust to have what I always called like a really wide wingspan on the team. And so it's hard to say, but the answer is a big number.
Hundreds? Thousands?
I would say hundreds.
Cool. So hundreds of creators. And what kind of size are we talking? Like, if we give listeners a range, you know, from what to what size?
Well, so, you know, folks as big as XQC, you know, he was somebody that was with Evolved on and off while I was there. And then, you know, all the way down feels mean to say, but, you know, there are people who are involved in the gaming and streaming space who are not interested in being a big streamer, but who are streaming as like part of a contractual obligation to an org or something, right? So I would say I have worked with people who are like just starting out, people below, you know, 100 viewers, all the way up to, you know, XQC is a team effort. Like, so many people work on that, but like, he's probably the biggest person that I've ever worked with.
XQC he's one of the biggest streamers on Twitch.
Yes.
I think he's pulled in over 100K, right? At one point.
I mean, his numbers are incredible. Like, he understands the space in a way that almost no one else does. It seems to me.
Yep. So you've worked with...
There's something about the way that he understands his own audience that's just like, it's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, there's some people like that are so switched on and just get it. Like, I think like Mr. Beast is like one of those folks.
Totally.
Jacksepticeye on the YouTube side. Like, these are just people that just get it and like know what the audience
I think about
wants.
like the offline TV folks.
Yep.
All of those people, like, just incredibly brilliant strategic decisions at like almost every turn. Like, it's incredible to see a track record like that, but you know.
So you've worked with hundreds of streamers. One of the things that I would love to think about as it becomes the content creation is true for everything, but especially in content creation, is the psychology behind it, which I think is interesting given your background
in psychology
as well, and doing some psychology. Yeah. So when it comes to the psychology of creators, you've worked with hundreds of those that are successful. What's different in their psychology?
I think a couple of different things. I think like a really solid belief in yourself is important. I think that the ceiling for content creation is so high, but the barriers are so numerous, and you need to be able to motivate yourself, and be able to like, yeah. So I think like a really strong faith in oneself. I also think people who, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but people who really like double, quadruple down on what works. And so I think a lot of people who are successful are people who have just, instead of trying in the Taylor way to become more well-rounded, instead have tried to just like really focus on what they're best at or what works the best. And so, you know, I think of somebody like, I think Ninja's a cool example, where it's like, he has been doing this like high level FPS, showcasing like what he does in his personality like for so long. And, you know, part of what works is like, he's set that expectation. He's shown people like what he's about. And then I'm sure he's had to resist the temptation or the opportunity to like become a variety streamer or like turn into a podcast. You know what I mean? Like, he just keeps doing the thing that like I hope works the best for him, but that certainly works, which is just like fucking slaying it at FPS games, you know? Does that make sense?
No, it totally does. I think there's an interesting thing in that where I experienced this very recently with a lot of Fortnite streamers that, you know, a lot of Fortnite streamers were blowing up, but they were just playing Fortnite all the time and then they burned out. But Fortnite was working for them. Have you ever noticed that where, yeah, it's the thing that works, but can you sustain it?
Totally. I mean, I was trying to think about how the most successful people sustain it. And I mean, I think it's different for everyone, but it's in that way, I suppose it's like burnout in anybody's life. You know, it's all about managing your stress before you get to that point. And so I think that is probably the other thing that most of the most successful people in content creation have in common is like a really capable set of like stress management coping skills. You know, I talked a little bit about meditation and gaming before, but it was something that I always thought was really interesting because, you know, in like a physical sport, something like football, being really emotional can be an advantage because it can lead you to like, you know, push past what feel like your physical limits. But in a game of skill or precision or like, you know, who's doing the fastest math in their head, like you don't want to be fired up. You don't want your hands shaking. You don't want to be like going nuts with emotion. And so having the ability to regulate your emotions, especially under stress, like because everyone is.
That's so interesting. I never even thought about that. When I go like back to my pro days, I never like I'm not the most emotional person.
Right.
And I never thought about how that was an advantage.
It's a huge advantage because emotion, like, it influences our judgment. It influences our reaction time. It influences our communication patterns. Like when you're, especially like the kinds of emotions that characterize gaming for some people, which is like getting really angry or getting really frustrated, like that stuff has a huge impact on your ability to execute like a precision task in a short amount of time. And if you like anything that you can be doing to keep your mind clear, to keep your heart rate down, to keep your emotions in check is a huge advantage. And there are a ton of people at a high level in gaming who do meditate. But I kind of think it's like they think of it as part of what gives them an edge. So like a lot of people don't talk about it, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Like it's something they do that gives them an advantage. Like I wouldn't tell my opponent either, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if in the competitive world especially, I think content creation is a little more less zero sum in the sense, but I think for playing competitively, you're definitely up against that person. So you probably don't want to share the secret sauce. On the flip side, we're talking about successful creators. I'm sure you've seen many not successful creators over the years. What was the things that like kind of common patterns that you've seen from them?
That's a good question. I think one of the things that Kimball, who also works at Evolved and who also played like a tremendous role in my development and is someone that I'm like eternally grateful for, one of the things that he always used to say that really stuck with me was like, all I do, and stay with me here because it's going to sound weird, but he was like, all I do is sell cake. You have to make the cake. And he would be saying this, you know, to the folks we're working with. And he was like, if you don't make one, I can't sell it. Right. And if what you make is bad, then like I'm probably not going to have a great time selling that either. And so I think a lot of the time, you know, I talk a lot or I used to talk a lot to people who like wanted to know like when in your career do you need somebody like me, right? Or services like these or when do you need to engage like a manager or an agent or what have you? And I think a lot of people think that you need to have those things to succeed in content creation. And the most important and the only irreplaceable thing in successful content creation is content that is successful. And if you are creating that, or if you can figure out how to create that, like the other things can come after that. And I think it's something that people maybe think the order doesn't matter or think that you have to have these like formal pieces in place before you can be successful. And I just really don't think that's true.
You're absolutely right. Content is king or queen.
Yes.
I should say content is queen.
Queen.
You mentioned talent manager and you mentioned agent, and I think for the listeners, they might not be familiar with those two things. They might think they could be the same.
Sure.
What is the difference between a manager and an agent?
So one, I think especially manager has like a couple of different meanings. And so I would encourage any streamer who's having this conversation to ask whoever's using these words like exactly what they mean. In this context, an agent is someone who's going to be doing like brand deals or like seeking out brand deals on someone's behalf, or working on an org deal, right? And a manager, especially in the way that I'm using it here, sometimes a manager means like someone who like cultivates a relationship. But in a management agency like Queens, what a manager is someone who's going to try to help grow your audience like with you, rather than simply selling against your existing audience. So for example, at Queens, we use our resources to bolster the women that we work with. And we put that money, those resources, that time in up front, and then hope that we'll sort of all rise together, if that makes sense. Whereas an agency is going to be more designed to like help you capitalize on your existing audience. Something like Queens is going to help grow your audience.
Totally makes sense. I think it's helpful. Most listeners are not at that stage yet, but eventually you will. And I think it's, there's good actors out there and there's bad actors out there, and just knowing the difference between the two.
Yeah, I mean, the way
really
that
important.
I always explain it is like you should have a ton of questions going into that conversation as the streamer or the content creator. And, you want to be working with people who are like willing and able to like comfortably and easily answer your questions. And anytime that you're getting like a weird answer or something like that, like trust yourself, like when you agree to these relationships, like they're deep, long-standing, meaningful relationships, and if you choose the right people for them, then like it can really unlock new levels and new opportunities. And so it's really important to vet people, do your research, ask around, and make sure that you're aligning with somebody who's right for you. Because even if it's not somebody who's like, sometimes it's not even about like a good or a bad actor as much as it is about like, does this group like advance my cause in the way I want to go, right?
Yeah, totally. When it comes to brand deals, when do you think a creator should care about a brand deal? Or considering, because a lot of creators when they're starting out, it'd be so nice to get a sponsorship deal, because then I could buy new gear or whatever it is.
Sure.
When should you consider brand deals?
I think when brand deals start coming to you is a great signal. I think a lot of times it depends. Like I would advise people to think about like what kind of brand deals you want in the future. So like, for example, if you want gear sponsorship, if you want someone to pay you to have their gear on your stream, like what are ways you can create content that are going to drive their eyes to you? So for example, who would be a good peripheral? So this is totally a hypothetical. But if you wanted to work with, say, like HyperX, like one thing that I would think of, especially if I was smaller and starting out, is like, if I want HyperX to pay me to look at their stuff on camera, like how can I show them that I would be good at that? Well, I've got my HyperX like headset or whatever I have, and like how can I make content with that now so that if and when HyperX is looking at me, or if I can point their attention my way, they're going to see that we have this organic connection already, that I'm already into HyperX. And so my audience is going to be more receptive to that messaging. So HyperX's dollars are going farther there. Does that make sense?
Totally does. I think one thing to add to that maybe is that when you're starting out as a creator is not to focus too heavily on sponsorships. I think your point around when they start coming to you, that's a good sign. But if you're aggressively trying to get sponsors, probably not a good use of your time.
Probably not a good use of your time. And when you're a new streamer, I would be interested to see the terms on the deal that the business is sending out for someone who's like a new, you know what I mean? I would be worried about being like taken advantage of or put in a position, like not even taken advantage of, but being placed in a structure that's not designed for growth, right? So when you sign up for stuff when you're small, you want to make sure that you have options either for it to be better or for it to be renegotiated or for you to be able to get out of it if you like grow like crazy. And that's something that, you know, you want to watch out for when you're small, especially if you're on the smaller side and like going aggressively in search of those deals. You want to watch out for stuff like that.
Another kind of similar related is affiliate relationships. These are really common in the creator community, especially for smaller content creators. What's your thoughts on affiliate programs and affiliate relationships?
I think, again, it depends on like how you feel about the brand in question. I think an affiliate relationship is a great way to like build a longer term relationship with a sponsor. And I tend to think that those, you know, whatever needs to be done to get those longer term relationships in place can be really beneficial because it allows you to have like a sustainable income stream. I mean, it's definitely a slower way to start. And I would say like, I also think affiliate deals are like a lot of work. And so I wouldn't, if I were a new streamer, like I wouldn't take an affiliate deal just to take one. I would want to take one that looked like, you know, with a company that I was interested in a longer term relationship with, potentially something with really favorable terms when it comes to like what they're asking from the creator in exchange. And I also would just be really mindful of that, like, affiliate deals are a ton of work generally for the creator. And so if that's not something that is like really exciting to you or something, or you know, with a brand that you're not really excited to like do a bunch of work for, I would maybe hold out.
Yeah, I think it comes back to your point earlier, which is content is queen. So focus on your content.
Yes.
Number one.
Quadruple down on what you're good at. Don't worry so much about like addressing the things that you're not good at.
Yep. What's the difference? Because you mentioned your background in esports, and then you're now, I would say, more on the creator side of things. What's the difference between an esports creator and a conventional content creator? Is there a difference?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, goals are a big difference. I think also like the strategic thinking around the content is different. So someone who's like a really high skill level pro has like different opportunities available to them in terms of like, you know, working with one of these sites that puts really high level content behind a paywall, or like, whereas somebody who's a creator is going to be able to have more like a react video or like an unboxing video. But like, I think the strategy is different. The content tends to feel different. And then the priority level, right? And so like, I think we see this all the time is that people really don't manage to do both very well at the same time. Being a professional player is like an incredibly time and effort consuming endeavor. And so is being a successful content creator. And many people have to choose one or the other. And, you know, I think that is one of the things that you see is like, you see people who like can do one or are interested in the other, but like you don't see people who are doing both. And I think that if you don't see people at the top of either who are doing both, I guess I should say, you do see people sometimes on the way up who seem like they want to do both. And I think it's hard to strategically focus and like say no to things that you might be interested in. But I think one of the biggest things about it is you really have to think about like both of these. You know, I kind of think about it in terms of like Dungeons and Dragons character points. Like I only have 20 points and I have to decide how to allocate them between like,
I love this
really
analogy.
high
It's such
skill
a good
level
analogy.
gameplay or pardon?
It's such a good analogy. I only have so many talents that I can spend. So I need to make sure I'm spending them wisely. Else I'm going to not be good at two things.
Exactly. It's like you don't want to half-ass two things. You want to whole-ass one thing.
Yep, totally. How do you scout talent? Like if I'm a young up-and-coming creator and I want to get on the radar of someone like you, how would I get on the radar of someone like you? What are you looking for?
The thing that I look for early is someone with a really engaged and sticky community. So I'm interested in folks who, you know, when they switch games on stream or when they're on just chatting or like when they're changing up what they're presenting to the audience, I'm looking for someone who's like maintaining stable viewer numbers through those switches. I'm looking for somebody who's doing a great job engaging their audience on Instagram, on Twitter, on Twitch, on TikTok. And I'm looking for somebody who's bringing, like, personally, I'm always looking for people who are bringing, like, humanity to it. You know, when I look at the women that we work with at Queens, one of the things that was the most important to me was that each of them be someone who had already taken the time to present a dynamic, authentic version of herself to the world, because that gives you the most flexibility in your growth. In this case.
At what point would someone get on your radar? Like, what kind of CCV or follower count are they getting on your radar?
It's not about that. I know that everyone wants it to be that simple. But for me, it really has more to do with, like, does someone feel authentic? Do they feel real? Do I feel like I'm, like, interacting with a person instead of, like, a caricature? And I know that there's a performative aspect, of course. But I think, again, that so many of the people who've done well are people who've had the ability to present themselves in an authentic way. And I'm not talking about, like, putting your whole life on the internet for public consumption. I'm just saying, like, people who are telling a meaningful story, are putting themselves out there in a meaningful way, and also, like, doing a good job, whatever level they're at. You know, I think it's really not a numbers thing for me. It's really about, you know, if I come in your stream and I'm lurking, I want to see, like, chat interaction almost regardless of the chat size. I want to see somebody who's, like, meaningfully engaging with that live audience. You know, when I'm going to your profiles, I want to see conversations with your audience. I want to see that audience being super engaged and, like, really fired up. And I want to see that community there. And that's what I really look for. And the truth is that some people are doing that at 40 to 100 viewers, and they've caught my attention before. And some people, you know, obviously when someone's coming to you with, like, massive CCV and huge social media numbers, like, it's much easier to assess, right?
Yeah, I think that's interesting.
You can't always start there.
What you mentioned around, you never know who's watching. You might have Taylor lurking in your stream and in your socials, and you might not even know it. So I think it's a good thing to keep in mind, is that
I'm a big lurker. I'm very quiet on the internet, but I'm, like, around all the time, looking around, reading, following along.
So we're almost at time, sadly, Taylor. But I would love, what are you excited about? You know, you've been now in the space for a while, and you're working on something really cool at Queens. What are you excited about going into 2021?
Oh gosh. Can I say I'm excited to get vaccinated? I am.
Yeah. Hopefully the world goes to normal.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that. You know, Queens has so much fun stuff planned for the new year. We're kicking off our monthly streaming series tomorrow. I don't know when this goes live, but we are doing that tomorrow, December 17th. And I'm really excited to see, I think that so many people have been working on projects and sort of baking things up in their homes during quarantine. And I'm really excited to see, you know, 2020 has been rough on everyone, I think, in some capacity. And I'm really excited to see people sort of turning the corner. I think that the whole industry has had, like, the economic losses and the loss of physical community around COVID-19. And we've had, you know, it was a rough summer in terms of just, like, mental health and the conversation again about, like, women in the space. And it's just been, like, a lot for everyone. And I think that I really believe in this energy that I've always sensed in gaming, is just this tenacity, this willingness to, like, dust ourselves off and, like, try again and do better. And I don't think that it's, you know, something that happens overnight or something that happens over one conversation, but I really see people all around the space, like, reaching out to each other and picking each other up. And I'm excited to see, like, what gaming looks like as we all have been doing that for a while. And I think it's really starting to transform the space.
Hell yeah. Looking forward to all of that. Everyone, if you're curious about what Queens Gaming Collective is, as Taylor said, go check it out, queens.gg. It's an incredible initiative backed by some really cool people. So go check it out. Taylor, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Stephen.